My name is Samuel Dean. I'm 43 years old. For more than 20 years, I dedicated my life to building the reputation, structure, and back-end operations of my father's mid-sized marketing firm. I wasn't the face of the business that was always my sister Lily, but I was the one who made sure the foundation held. I worked quietly, late into the night most days, often sacrificing weekends and vacations, all because I believed one day my father would see that loyalty deserved leadership. But when the time came for him to retire, he handed the keys to my sister with a handshake and a smile like it had been decided all along. The announcement was made in front of the entire company. I stood there, silent, holding a congratulatory glass of champagne, while every corner of my gut twisted into knots. My father never looked me in the eye that day, and Lily, she gave a speech about innovation, modern leadership, and finally bringing the company into the future. Not a single mention of my name, my work, or even a thank you for the years we spent side by side making her ideas executable. I applauded with everyone else, but something inside me changed. That was the moment I realized I had been playing the wrong game, and they were betting I'd stay loyal forever. I didn't explode. I didn't argue. I didn't pack up and walk away dramatically. I stayed, for a while, and that confused them more than anything. I kept doing my job, kept showing up early, kept taking meetings that Lily forgot to attend. But my eyes were different now. I wasn't looking to belong anymore. I was watching, learning, and quietly preparing. I began documenting everything. Overlooked budgets, client patterns, missed deadlines that she brushed under the rug. I started building a personal archive, just in case. It wasn't long before things started slipping under Lily's management. She had charisma, sure, but little discipline. The first few months, her charm kept things afloat. Clients gave her grace. The staff cheered her social media campaigns. But under the surface, cracks were growing. She didn't understand the back end, and she didn't want to. She dismissed the systems I'd built as clunky and pushed for automation without strategy. I offered suggestions, gently at first, but she called me rigid and stuck in the past. My father, now semi-retired, watched all this from a distance, too proud to admit what he had done. One night I stayed late. I walked through the office, alone, lights dimmed, just listening. This place had been my second home since I was 19. I knew its walls, its pacing, its heartbeat. And now it was being led by someone who only knew how to smile for the spotlight. I wasn't angry. I was focused. That night I opened a new folder on my desktop and titled it Plan B. They never saw it coming. In the weeks that followed, I became what you might call the company ghost. Present, but no longer emotionally tethered. I still answered emails. I still showed up to meetings. I even laughed at the occasional joke. But inside I was detaching, breath by breath, from everything I had helped build. Lily thought she had won. My father thought I was simply being gracious. Neither of them noticed the shift in my silence. The kind of silence that doesn't mean surrender, it means calculation. I wasn't planning a dramatic return. I was planning something more dangerous, my exit. The truth is, I had been the one holding up the back-end infrastructure of the company for years. CRMs, billing cycles, client onboarding funnels, operational workflows, all coded or configured by me. I never bragged about it, because I thought we were building something together. But Lily didn't understand what she inherited, and worse, she didn't care to. She started outsourcing everything to flashy agencies with big promises and shallow results. The team grew confused, deadlines slipped, and quietly, clients started asking for me directly, even though I wasn't technically in charge anymore. I started saying no, not loudly, not bitterly, just gently, firmly no. I'm not available for that project. You'll need to check with Lily. I'm no longer overseeing that department. It's a powerful thing, watching someone realize they've taken the engine out of the car and replaced it with glitter. She had the title, yes. But slowly the structure began to cave beneath her because she never understood what kept it standing in the first place. I didn't sabotage her. I simply removed my energy from a system that no longer valued it. My father remained oddly silent through it all. Every so often, I'd catch him glancing at me in meetings, almost like he wanted to speak. But pride, I suppose, is louder than truth in some men. I stopped waiting for him to acknowledge the mistake. He had made his choice, and I had made mine, to quietly, thoroughly, and methodically remove myself from the business that I once considered my legacy. But I wasn't walking away with nothing. I was walking away with every skill they took for granted, and a few they didn't even know I had. I opened a consulting LLC in my name. Quietly, legally, efficiently, no fanfare, no social media posts. Just a business account, a site, and a folder of case studies I had accumulated from my time at the company. A few weeks later, I signed my first private client, one of our firm's oldest clients, actually. They approached me directly, asking if I still offered that clean back-end magic Lily couldn't replicate. I said yes. That one contract alone nearly replaced my salary, but I didn't gloat. I let the silence speak. And it did. There's something sacred about doing things quietly. No explosions, no ultimatums, just calculated, invisible movement. I knew the company wouldn't collapse overnight, and I wasn't interested in revenge for its own sake. I wanted clarity. I wanted the truth to speak for itself. While Lily hosted brunch meetings with influencers, I was building something real, client by client, system by system. My consulting firm began to grow beneath the surface like roots under pavement, and every root made their foundation just a little more unstable. I never badmouthed the company or my family. I didn't need to. Clients talk, vendors talk, staff who feel unseen talk. Within 3 months, 5 of our legacy clients reached out to me personally. One even said, "It just doesn't feel the same without you." I politely referred them back to the company on paper. But they persisted. That's when I realized I wasn't chasing revenge. I was simply reclaiming the reputation I had spent decades earning. Without saying a word, I was becoming the real brand behind the brand. At night, I began working on a document I never thought I'd write, a full audit of the company's internal inefficiencies. Not to expose them publicly, but because I knew sooner or later they'd come to me. Desperate people don't ask for help politely. They reach with trembling hands. I wasn't hoping for their failure, but I could already see the trajectory. An $8 million account, our largest, was under strain. The client had expressed frustration multiple times, and Lily brushed it off with Instagram-ready charm. I, on the other hand, was documenting everything. Every ignored email, every budget overage, every timeline missed. My folder, Plan B, had become an ecosystem of leverage. But more than that, it had become my blueprint for freedom. I was learning what made the business tick and what it truly needed to thrive. Spoiler, it wasn't a pretty face or a viral campaign. It was consistency, accountability, integrity. The things Lily mocked were the very traits that built trust over decades, and I had that trust still. The irony didn't escape me. My father had once told me, "Loyalty matters more than flash," and yet he had handed everything to the flashiest person in the room. Maybe he wanted to believe Lily would rise to the occasion, or maybe he didn't want to admit that his quiet son had become something he never anticipated. Indispensable. Either way, I stopped waiting for his validation. I had something stronger. and I knew it was only a matter of time before their storm would find my door. It happened on a Thursday, late afternoon. I had just finished a strategy session with a new client, ironically a former competitor of my father's firm, when my phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in months. It was Lily. I didn't answer. I let it ring once, twice, then go silent. A few minutes later, a text followed. "Call me. It's urgent." I stared at the screen, unmoved. Urgency, I've learned, is often born from arrogance. Finally meeting reality, I set my phone face down and went back to work. That evening, I opened my inbox and saw it. A thread of internal emails had been forwarded to me anonymously. Staff were panicking. The $8 million client, our crown jewel, had officially terminated the contract. No warning, just a single line from their CEO. "We're going in a different direction," but I knew what that really meant. I had seen the warning signs months ago. So had Lily. She just hadn't believed the consequences would ever reach her. For the first time, the spotlight wasn't enough. The next day, my father called. I hadn't heard his voice in over 4 months. He skipped pleasantries. "We lost Hulton Mason," he said. His voice had an unfamiliar crack in it. Tired, unsure. "Lily says you might be able to help." I let the silence stretch, not as a punishment, but as proof that I was no longer the eager son waiting for approval. I told him calmly, "I saw this coming." I tried to warn her. There was a pause on the other end. Then the quietest whisper, "I know." He asked to meet in person. I agreed. Not for closure, but to understand just how far things had fallen. When we sat across from each other at the same table where I'd once learned to read financial statements as a teenager, he looked smaller, not in stature, but in certainty. He didn't wear the usual pride. Instead, he wore something else, regret. "I thought giving her the title would bring her up to your level," he said. "I didn't realize how far she'd drag everything down." I didn't gloat. I didn't say, "I told you so." I simply opened my laptop, slid it across the table, and showed him the audit I had compiled. His eyes scanned the document slowly. The silence between us was dense. After a few minutes, he leaned back and said, "You knew this was coming." I nodded once. "Yes," I said, and I was ready for it. That was the moment I realized the shift had fully taken place, not in them, but in me. I no longer needed a seat at their table. I had built my own. Lily didn't show up to the meeting. Whether it was out of shame, pride, or fear, I didn't ask. My father offered excuses on her behalf, but I didn't need them. I already understood. When people build power on illusion, they're terrified of being seen clearly, and that's what my presence did now. It revealed the truth she'd been dodging since the beginning. That charm can get you in the room, but character keeps you there, and she didn't have enough of it to withstand failure. Over the next week I was brought in, not as a savior, not as a brother, but as a consultant. My own firm billed them hourly, no family discounts, no emotional concessions, just business. The very first meeting I led included a full staff debrief, faces lit up, not with joy but with relief. They missed structure, they missed consistency. One junior strategist pulled me aside and said, "It finally feels like we're being led again." I didn't smile, I just nodded. There was work to do. Lily's name was rarely mentioned in those meetings. She had become a ghost in her own empire. My father, now reluctantly stepping back in, tried to stabilize the company's image publicly, but internally he knew the ship had taken on too much water. One by one, more clients walked, quietly, without drama. The kind of exits that sting the most because they come without warning or noise. Just contracts terminated, inboxes emptied, and calls no longer returned. The irony was sharp. I had once begged for Lily to take her role seriously, to listen, to learn. But she had seen herself as untouchable, the golden child, the natural heir. She didn't understand that reputation is earned in whispers, not applause. Her collapse wasn't loud. It was subtle, quiet, like a stage curtain falling after a failed play, with no audience left to clap. One night, I received a message. It was from Lily. Just 5 words. "I'm sorry. You were right." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I deleted it. Not out of spite, but because I no longer needed her apology. I didn't need closure from the same hand that once dismissed me. I had closed the chapter myself, not with vengeance, but with results, and I had rewritten the ending in my own voice. That's the difference between revenge and resolution. One seeks pain, the other, peace. By the time I officially took over operations as an external consultant, nearly 40% of the company's core accounts had walked away. The damage wasn't just in the numbers, it was in the culture. Employees looked over their shoulders when they spoke, afraid of being blamed for Lily's decisions. Managers were burned out. Unsure of their futures, the walls once decorated with marketing awards and press clippings now seemed to echo with the absence of confidence, and in that silence I rebuilt. I didn't bring a hammer, I brought a pen. I rewrote policies, streamlined reporting systems, and established accountability that hadn't existed in years. I mentored the staff who were still loyal, promoted 2 forgotten but brilliant analysts to leadership, and started rebuilding trust, not through speeches, but through follow-through. People don't respond to titles, they respond to consistency. Slowly they began to believe again, not in the brand, but in each other. And that was worth more than any client. My father quietly observed it all, sometimes from the boardroom, sometimes from his office, with the door slightly open. He didn't interfere, but he didn't apologize either. I think he understood that too much had happened for words to fix. One evening, after a full day of system overhauls, he stood in the hallway and simply said, "If you want it, I'll step aside." I didn't even pause. "No," I replied. "I already have what I need." Because I did, my legacy was never tied to their approval. It was tied to my own standards. Lily eventually resigned. It wasn't dramatic, no public meltdown or defiant exit, just a quiet press release and a handoff that came too late to matter. She moved to another city, started her own boutique agency, and from what I hear, it's struggling, but I don't check. I don't track her progress or hope for her fall. I don't need to. Her story will write itself, and mine already has. A year later, I dissolved my consulting contract. I left the company entirely, not because I had failed, but because I had completed the work. I restored what I had once built, fortified what was broken, and proved without a single argument that respect is earned in discipline, not inherited through nameplates. And I walked away with my dignity intact, my business thriving, and my peace louder than any applause they could have given me years ago. Some victories are quiet, but they echo for a lifetime. After I stepped away for good, I spent the first few weeks in stillness, no rushing to the office, no late-night crisis calls, no lingering resentment pulling me back into old habits. I sat on my back porch each morning with a black coffee and silence as my only company, and in that silence I remembered who I was before the company tried to define me, before I confused being useful with being valued. There was peace in reclaiming my name on my own terms. Business at my own firm grew fast, faster than I anticipated. Word spread quietly. I was never flashy about my client list, but results have a way of traveling further than announcements. What surprised me most were the people who reached out. Not just former clients, but former colleagues, People who had once looked through me, now asking to work with me. It was never about revenge. It was about being seen without having to shout. One day, I got a handwritten letter in the mail from one of the junior analysts I had promoted. She had stayed after I left, but in her words, "The heart left when you did." She told me that she started her own firm, small but growing, and she credited that courage to me. I sat with the letter for a long time. It hit deeper than any contract or client win, because that's what real leadership is. Not control, but creation. Not being in charge, but being a catalyst. As for my father, he eventually sold the company. Not out of failure, but fatigue. Too much had shifted. The name on the door didn't carry the same weight. He called to tell me. We didn't rehash the past. He simply said, "You were always right about the quiet ones. They build things that last." It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest he'd ever come to giving me credit. And for once, I didn't need it to feel whole. Lily never reached out again, and I never searched her name again. Not because I don't care, but because I've stopped living in chapters that are already closed. I built something stronger from what they discarded. I didn't burn the bridge. They just never noticed when I crossed it and kept walking. Now, on the other side, I've built something better, not bigger, not louder, just better, smarter, kinder, and no one can take that away from me again. Looking back, I realized the most powerful position in any room is the one no one sees coming. For years, I was the quiet son, the reliable employee, the person who didn't ask for much. I was easy to overlook because I didn't demand attention. But in the end, that was my greatest advantage. They underestimated the man who listened more than he spoke, who took notes in meetings, who never interrupted even when he had the answer. What they called passivity was preparation. What they dismissed as weakness was discipline. People often think revenge needs to be loud, explosive, but I've learned it's far more powerful when it's silent. When you win not with wrath, but with grace, when your absence speaks louder than their titles. I didn't have to humiliate Lily. I didn't need to confront my father. The results told the story. And results, unlike words, can't be denied. They are undeniable evidence of value, something no one can fake or fabricate for long. Now, I teach what I've learned. Not formally, not from a podium, but in rooms with entrepreneurs, founders, and quiet builders. I teach them that humility is not invisibility, that they don't need to shout to be heard. They just need to be consistent enough that when they finally speak, everyone listens. I share my story not for sympathy, but to remind others that being overlooked can be the greatest blessing, because it gives you time to prepare without resistance. There's something poetic about walking away from a place you once thought you'd die trying to fix. It's not bitterness, it's evolution. I didn't lose my place in the family legacy. I redefined it, and in doing so, I created a model that others now follow. I've watched the very people who used to ignore me now ask for advice. I've mentored young professionals who remind me of myself 20 years ago, quiet, capable, waiting for someone to believe in them. But the truth is, we don't need someone else to believe in us first. We just need to remember who we are. Before the world told us to shrink. That's what this story is about. Not just betrayal and redemption, but the sacred journey of self-respect, of walking away from places that no longer deserve you, and having the strength to build your own. That's not just revenge, that's legacy. It took me years to understand that the betrayal wasn't the breaking, it was the beginning. If my father had handed me the company, I would have remained in the shadow of his name, always trying to live up to someone else's blueprint. If Lily had been competent, I might have stayed out of loyalty, pouring my energy into a vision that never truly reflected me. But their choices, their favoritism, their arrogance gave me the greatest gift, the freedom to become something on my own terms. I sometimes wonder if Lily ever thinks about what she lost. Not the position, not the company, but the respect, the trust, the quiet partnership she could have had with someone who never wanted to outshine her, only to help her rise. I don't resent her anymore. I see her for what she is, a mirror. She revealed the parts of me I had hidden too long, the parts that needed to rise whether she failed or not. The business I run now is lean, focused, and values-driven. I don't chase scale. I don't seek applause. Every client I work with knows one thing from the start. I build for longevity. My systems are invisible by design, but they hold companies together like a spine. I've had CEOs offer equity, founders offer buyouts, but I never forget the lesson. If you give away your soul for validation, you'll always be at the mercy of someone else's ego. One afternoon, I passed by the old office. It had been remodeled since the sale, new signage, new leadership, new energy. I didn't feel nostalgia, I felt gratitude, because I had walked out of that place without burning it down. But I had never walked back. There's something powerful about knowing you can return and choosing not to. It means the wound has healed, the story has ended, and the lesson has taken root. These days I speak more freely, not louder but clearer. I no longer whisper ideas and hope someone notices. I build, I lead, and I teach. And every once in a while I get a message from someone still inside the systems I left behind. They ask how I did it, how I stayed so calm, so focused. My answer is always the same. I let their betrayal sharpen me, not shatter me. That's how you win. Quietly, permanently. The most powerful thing I ever did was leave without slamming the door. There's a strength in silence that shouting never touches. A kind of quiet that doesn't beg to be heard, it demands to be understood. When my father gave Lily the company, I thought I had lost something. But looking back now, I see that I was being set free. Their decision removed the ceiling I had once mistaken for a sky, and what they saw as rejection was, in truth, a release. I don't carry anger with me anymore, just memory and discernment. I remember how it felt to be passed over, to sit at meetings where my work was praised, but my name left out. I remember the ache of being loyal to people who didn't see me as an equal. But I also remember the moment I realized that being underestimated is a secret kind of superpower, because while they're busy ignoring you, you're free to build in peace, to plan without interference, to grow without imitation. Now, every decision I make is mine. Every success earned. Every mistake my own. I don't have to ask for permission. I don't need to prove anything. I am no longer working for approval. I am working from alignment. That's the difference between survival and sovereignty, and that's what I wish someone had told me in my 20s. The people who overlook you today may one day need you. But by then you'll have outgrown them. There's a photo of me as a teenager in my old bedroom, holding a mock business plan I wrote for my dad's firm. Back then, I thought legacy meant inheriting what someone else built. But now, I know the truth. Legacy is what you create when no one gives you the chance, when you carve your own path, with calloused hands and clear intent. My company, my real one, isn't built on revenge. It's built on restoration, of dignity, of confidence, of control. If you're listening to this and you've been passed over, misunderstood, pushed aside, don't let it break you. Let it prepare you. The people who dismiss you today are handing you something they don't even recognize: power. Take it, grow in it, and when the day comes that they call your name again, you won't need to answer, because you'll already be beyond them, building something far greater than they ever imagined. And the best part? You'll do it without raising your voice.